Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to discuss Captain Marvel because I just saw it yesterday. Obviously, I'll start off with a little bit of non-spoiler. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. Like, obviously, it's lots of fun. And that kind of, like, I didn't expect, like, there to be as much fun in it. Like, I figured, like, obviously it's the MCU, it's Marvel movies, so there's going to be, like, levity to it and everything. But I didn't expect, in particular, Carol to have as much fun as she did. Like, she kind of, like, oh, like, I really like, because this is a character I'm not that familiar with, so I didn't know what to really expect going into it. But, you know, you get to see a lot of her personality kind of shine through the movie, which I think is pretty dope. And you just see her, I think, you know, even with her situation being what it is, obviously I'll get to it when I get to spoilers, but even with that, you still see a lot of her personality coming through, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Just in the little tidbits, I like a lot of stuff with her and Fury kind of bouncing off of each other. Just, there's a lot of fun in this movie. So once again, if you have not seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. So going forward from this point, it will be full spoilers, so do keep that in mind. A lot of interesting things, because obviously I went into this movie having a lot of my own thoughts and theories about how things were going to go down. For one, because I kept, you know, because I was curious about it, because I was like, obviously there's stuff of her as Carol Danvers on Earth, and then like I saw that obviously she looks like an adult, and you know, when she's with the Kree and everything too. So I'm like, okay, so how much of a time frame is that? Apparently it's been 6 years, which that's kind of crazy, losing 6 of your years of your life like that. Not only did you lose it, like, the fact of the matter is, like, you thought you were fighting for the good guys in this situation, which I'm not too surprised, because it's like, hey, it's the Kree. You know, at this point in time, a combination of Guardians of the Galaxy as well as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will show you Kree aren't the best people, you know, so we'll just kind of leave it at that, you know. So that was kind of interesting, because I was trying to figure out what her whole deal is too, especially because it was like, because the trailer made it seem like, oh, like because especially because the Kree were like, oh, we gave you your powers and stuff. Like, I'm like, you guys made her? Like, that's what made it such a hard time for me to believe that, because I was like, no way they gave her, because like you don't see any other Kree with like crazy powers like she does. So it's like, did they really make her? I mean, was she supposed to be like some weapon? It's like, no, it's because of her amnesia they could take advantage of it. And it's like, hey, you're a Kree warrior. Here you're, you know, our weapon. We made you. We can destroy you. We can. What we gave, we can take away it. Essentially, because I was like, yeah, because I was like, I don't think your technology is that advanced to give her that power. Yeah, you know, because I'm also thinking like from the point of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too, because it's like that's why you're gathering up Inhumans. I mean, to be fair, that was like one particular Kree doing that, but you know, because they need weapons and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting to see that. But I do like I said, I was talking about the non-spoilers, like, you know, Carol's personality, like she was fighting one of the Skrulls and like it's roaring at her and she's going bad to it. I was like, I love that. Also, like her and her team, like that. There's a dude from Guardians, because that kind of took me by surprise, because I knew Roman was going to be in this, but I didn't know that. I don't blank on the character's name, but it's so interesting because that dude, I knew obviously, like, I thought like his ties to the Kree was like from later on, because I thought he was like a mercenary. It's like, no, his ties to the Kree go back a ways. And so it's kind of interesting to see him in there. But I also love that conversation of him being like, oh, when he faced the Kree, it was his face staring back. And she's like she cracks a joke about basically him being ugly. And they're like, yeah, we've never seen you smile or laugh. And he's like, I am laughing. I'm laughing right now on the inside. And it's just bits like that. Even that camaraderie was kind of interesting, especially when you consider the fact is that a lot of the team, at least one person on the team, I think, wasn't her name Minerva, like she was the only one that potentially knew about Carol's real situation. Even the whole situation with Jude Law's character, like his situation with Carol, it almost makes you question like whether they ever really did have like a friendship or anything, just because, well, it was kind of more of a student and mentor relationship. But the fact of the matter is, you saw that there was a strong bond there, even just from that time we saw them together. And it's just kind of sad to think like, oh yeah, like that whole thing was a lie, because it's like he's the reason that she got taken in the first place. So that was just kind of interesting. And speaking of that, that is kind of interesting in itself, the whole like, oh, she was taken situation, especially when you get like her friend Maria's standpoint on it, because it's like, I thought my best friend was dead. Not only did I find out that you're actually alive, you were out there the entire time not knowing who you were and everything, and now you come back with this energy flowing through you and everything. And it's like, that was kind of a heartbreaking scene for her, because it's just kind of like, you know, you're my best friend in the world and I thought you were gone. And just like, that was kind of, you know, especially because it's like Carol's in front of you, she doesn't even know who you really are and stuff like that. You know, the cute, like, you know, aspect between her best friend and her best friend's daughter Monica, like that whole situation I thought was kind of pretty neat. And obviously I really liked the Fury situation. The whole Coulson thing kind of got me for a second. Really quickly, I'm gonna talk about that. Was like the fact is Coulson got in a car, he was not talking a lot, he wasn't acting, like his personality had, I was like, oh, it's a Skrull. Don't tell me we're gonna make it so that Coulson's been a Skrull the entire time. It's like, oh no, he got replaced at, you know, the Blockbuster and stuff like that. I love him calling out Fury. He's like, hey, you left me here. And I was like, oh snap. So, because I love Fury, like, and you know, Coulson being there, giving, you know, Carol the third degree, being like, oh, aliens and stuff like that. Another thing I should also note too, it took me by surprise that there was actually humor with the Skrulls. I mean, and again, you know, in the grand scheme of things, them not necessarily being the villains, which was kind of a nice touch. Kind of makes sense, you know, that they would actually have humorous bits too. But even when they were getting inside of Carol's head, it's like, no, go back. Like, that's not dialogue I feel like you would typically hear from a villain. Be like, oh, go back. No, stop right there. I want focus. Like, it didn't seem like villainous dialogue to me, even though they kind of play. It seemed like they were giving them personality, especially kind of like the main Skrull, was named Talus, like him cracking jokes at points in times and stuff like that. Like at one point in time, like when they're looking for what they're looking for later on in the movie, the ship, wait, it's been in orbit the entire time. It's like, wait, you didn't know that? And then he kind of looks to his dude, he's like, wait, you couldn't even find it? And he's like, this is my science guy, and he couldn't figure out. And his guy's over there just kind of shrugging. I love that. And even when he's freaking out about Goose, I love that. And everyone's like, oh, you're just afraid of cats? And he's like, no, that's not a cat, that's something else. I kind of figured the way Goose is just all over the place. But also part of me was thinking like, oh, is that going to be a running gag where they think it's something else when in actuality it's just a cat? And I was like, oh, because I thought that was going to be how they were going to find Skrulls throughout the movie, being like, oh, put Goose in front of him because Goose would be able to sniff him out or something. Like, that's what I thought. Because I'm like, that's an annoying ass enemy to have to fight, you know, Skrulls being able to disguise himself as anyone. I even, you know, kind of, which is funny because when they first get to Earth, like, he takes on the form of someone and then someone in his unit takes on the same person. He's like, yo, I call dibs on this form. Pick another form, essentially. I really like that. That whole Goose situation got me too. I really like that because I was like, okay, what's so special about Goose? What's Goose's whole situation? I even love it later on. It's like, oh yeah, they scan Goose and it's like, oh, high threat level high, and do it to Fury and it's like low. He's like, that thing must be busted. Don't listen to that. That thing must be busted. I love that he took offense to that. But Goose's whole situation, that was interesting. Like the tentacles flying out and everything. I was like, oh, really didn't see that coming. I wasn't sure what to expect when it came to the whole Goose situation, but I didn't see that coming. It is kind of interesting to also see, like, obviously kind of going back to the whole aspect of the Skrull and everything, how once again, you don't know who's who. Like, I even love, like, because it adds this, like, deception aspect to it, because it's like, oh man, even here, like, on Earth, there's, like, Fury's boss is one too, and I'm like, oh man, that sucks. I mean, later on we find out it's like, oh, it's not like he killed him and took on his form, which I think that kind of speaks volumes in itself, because the Skrull didn't kill the people they impersonated, they just took on their form. I mean, they don't need to kill them, they just got a standard DNA, and it's like, oh, lo and behold, we can transform into him. I even love that whole conversation that Fury and Maria have with Talos being like, oh, so like, can you turn into other objects too, like a filing cabinet? He's like, why would I turn into a filing cabinet? Like, I forgot what it was. They were saying like, oh, could you turn it into this? And he's like, almost being like, what is that? And everything. And I love it. This being, just, like I said, just the back and forth between everyone was so interesting. But I really liked it amongst Carol and Fury. And just at one point in time, she's trying to learn all this stuff about him. And then I forgot what that tidbit for information, like, what's the strangest fact about yourself? I think it was something where he was talking about, like, I forgot what, I'm blanking and it bugs me so much. There was something about a certain thing he doesn't eat. If it's like that, he's just, I can't do it. And then she's kind of smiling. He's like, you didn't actually know that. And she's like, no, I didn't, but I'm glad to know it now. You know, it's just like, it's almost kind of got like that buddy cop feel to it. I think they did a very good job of nailing that relationship between these two, like, hanging out like that, which is so dope. And it is something I thought, and I, you know, because basically, meeting Carol, dealing with the Skrull as well as the Kree is what prepared him for what eventually would go down in Avengers. I figured that this is what set him off to be like, I was waiting for an enemy from the sky, and it's because Carol essentially prepared him for it. Like, you know, because it's like, it's that moment where he realized his world was a lot bigger than just his world, you know. It's just much bigger than Earth, that there's so much out there that they're not aware of that could come and strike at Earth at any point in time. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because that means Fury's been prepared for this for the past like 20 years. That's a long time to become Wade. I also love that later on when Carol's showing off her powers to Maria and her daughter, or at the very least also telling them about aliens and stuff like that. It's like, because her friend was like, I have a hard time believing it, and then, you know, Fury being like, yeah, it is kind of hard to believe. That sounds like something we wouldn't want the general public to know, wouldn't it? So people wouldn't freak out. But kind of going back a little bit to what I was bringing up earlier, was the whole aspect of the Skrulls not being the bad guys at all. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's like, well, of course the Kree are going to be the enemy to a certain extent, but you almost thought like the Skrull were. And I thought Talos's whole thing was kind of interesting, where he was basically like, well, the fact is it's war, so we shouldn't be too surprised that things kind of, you know, there's kind of been bad on both sides, so it's not like their hands are completely clean in this whole situation as well. But it kind of makes even that scene earlier in the movie even sadder, because like all those people that were there that they were fighting and basically killing, like those were, you know, Skrull refugees essentially, because the Kree's been sweeping across the galaxy, like, you know, conquering different planets and stuff like that. I am curious though, in the long run, I guess, because Yongru, like, I was curious, like, why, you know, Jude Law's character didn't let Roman know ahead of time. He was like, I guess because it was Carol, because it's like, well, I can't have him destroying the planet with Carol. They got to retrieve her first, because, you know, she's the weapon and everything. But then it's like, well, when the time comes and he finds out later on, like, oh, she remembers everything, you know? Like I said, that's a hard thing to kind of pill to swallow, like your entire, this life that you come to know, you don't remember your previous life. But I guess, like, you know, everything with the Skrulls getting inside of her head kind of jump started it, because obviously there were already remnants of it when she was sleeping and stuff like that. But still, it's actually kind of interesting, because like obviously this is like, I guess, one of the main cities for the Kree and stuff like that. We only got like a little peek at it, which is kind of interesting. That's still kind of because even everything with Roman was all on his ship, so that's still something that's left a mystery that I guess going forward we could kind of cut back to it at some point in time and stuff like that. Which is interesting too, considering the fact is there is, you know, the goddess of death, Hela, as well. So it's just interesting how stuff like that happens. I doubt there's a tie into that. Maybe there is. I mean, especially considering the fact is, like I said, in certain regards in the MCU, the Asgardians are kind of treated as aliens, but that's a whole thing. It's actually kind of interesting. An interesting thing to me was also, I didn't know Carol was such a skilled fighter, like, because I only saw like what I saw from the trailers, which is like her kind of using her powers, and it's just, I guess we see bits of it in the trailer, but I just didn't realize she was as skilled as a fighter as she was. I like that whole scene of like she's trying to fight with like her hands locked away, and that was pretty badass. Of like, you know, like she's really good at like hand to hand. I mean, to be fair, she was trained as well, so it makes sense, but it's pretty dope to see. It's like, oh, not just for powers, like she can handle herself like a you know, hand-to-hand combat as well. So it's kind of interesting, because I went into this also being curious, like, was there ever going to be any heavy ties to the Infinity Stones? Not really. The only one was the Tesseract, which is interesting. And it's interesting that, like, and I love this all ties into Fury, because like Coulson's like, oh, so I heard that the reason why your eye got, you know, messed up is because one of those Kree did that to you. And he was like, I will not confirm or deny that is what happened. And too embarrassed to admit that he was scratched in the eye by a cat. I mean, to be fair, it's not a cat. Because I love when it happens. He's like, oh, it's going to get better. And Talos is like, no, it won't. I love him later on being like, oh yeah, like I can always go back to pretending to be your boss again. He's like, oh, I liked it a little bit, you know, having those bright blue eyes and stuff like that. Like I said, it caught me by surprise, like how much fun, like, would happen between characters, especially consider, because I guess I went into this thinking like, oh, the Skrulls are going to be like these big baddies, and it turns out they're actually like, you know, a race just trying to survive, especially because a lot of them have been scattered all over, you know, the universe, trying to escape the Kree and stuff like that. And that was kind of an interesting thing too, finding out that that's what Carol's whole thing was. Like, that's why she wasn't around, because basically she's trying to help save an entire species, track them down, save them, and stop the Kree, especially the whole supreme intelligence thing. Now that was really interesting. Like, I wonder, because obviously like it's been a 20-year period, so I'm wondering, is that all that been resolved off screen, that maybe we'll get to see that potentially in the future in like a sequel of Captain Marvel, or is it just something that, you know, would take place present day, that, you know, because the interesting thing is, I know I'm skipping around all over the place, so I do apologize, but that was always something interesting too, because it's like Carol is the same age she is in Captain Marvel as she's in Avengers. You know, you can tell by the trailer and stuff like that, but it's so interesting to me because I'm like, like, so was she frozen all that time? Does her powers make it so that she ages slowly or something like that? Like, what's happening with that? Do know I didn't see the end thing, because there might have been like a very, you know, there's usually at least 2 credit things. I only saw one of them, that being what it is. I'll talk about that later, but if there was a second one, I didn't see it. So I am curious to find out what the whole Monica thing is going to be like, because the fact is like they made such a point. I was actually thinking we were going to, like, because obviously Carol's getting her like signature jacket from Maria, and then like Monica handed her jacket, but I'm curious like how much of that's going to be, because I thought it was going to be something like, oh, we see her present day with it, because she's like, what, a little kid at the time, so she's got to be like late 20s, early 30s, present day in the MCU, you know. So, but instead, obviously, she ended up giving Carol her jacket, which is pretty dope, because I know there's certain, obviously, designs of that character that kind of have that like signature code. I don't know if she wears it all the time in the comic books or not, but still, like, I know some of like the Marvel games, like in particular, like Marvel versus Capcom, like that's one of her designs, is that coat and everything. I also do think it's pretty dope, like obviously, like I've talked about it before, like the whole like how her helmet kind of gives her the mohawk and stuff like that, my thoughts and theories and stuff like that, but still, I thought that was kind of like a pretty neat design. I also love the reason why she has the colors that she does, is like because she didn't want to wear the Kree colors anymore, and Monica's the one that kind of helped decide how that suit looks so good, like in no matter what colors it is, but I think that red and blue design, like obviously it really looks good on that suit. But going back to it, like I really like that Carol is kind of like how she is in a fight and stuff like that. Like I said, it's like she's having so much fun, because even at one point later on in the fights later on, she shoots her energy and she kind of flies back and she kind of smiles. She's like, holy shit, this is so cool. I like that in a superhero, when a superhero is doing some cool dope stuff, they're like, this is cool and dope. I love that. And she's having so much fun and just kind of, I don't know, I just think that's so dope. And I think it also I think it comes from the fact of also being a pilot, so I think that kind of plays into it, because it's like the skies is her territory. That's where she feels the most comfortable at, you know. So I thought that's pretty dope. It's also interesting that I haven't even talked about it at all, like knowing where she originally got her powers from, everything dealing with Dr. Lawson and everything. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's actually kind of sad how everything kind of ended up playing out like that. Like, you know, Jude Law's character ended up being the one that killed her, and the fact is that Carol, always trying to do the right thing, ended up destroying that engine, that light speed engine that they were after, and that's what gave her her powers. It's so interesting. Like I said, like especially the way they went about telling the story, I think was a very good job, because of that whole like realization of like I said, everything being a lie. I think, you know, and it came at the right moment to be like, I thought I was here on some like mission for good, but it turns out I've been working for the bad guys, hunting innocent people this entire time, you know. And it actually kind of shocked me in many regards, of like, because, you know, everybody was kind of under the impression like, oh, somebody on Earth had to be a Skrull. I mean, who's to say there aren't still any Skrull that might have stayed on Earth? You would assume everyone would have left with like Talos and all that, but still, you know, because I was under the impression like the moment him and Talos and Fury touched hands like that, I was like, the real Fury's going to die, he's going to take his place. Turns out not to be the case at all. I was like actually shocked. I was like, oh wow, so that really is the real Fury. So it's like, huh. So I guess that theory that a lot of people had about like, oh, the Skrull, they're basically someone in this universe being a Skrull, is, I mean, there's still a possibility, but it might not be what everyone kind of thinks it would be. So that's kind of interesting, because I kept hearing that theory for such a long time, and now, because like I said, like I would feel like all the Skrull would have left too, because they're all going off to find their own planet. Which, another thing to think about too is like how this might all play out towards the Super Skrull character, because like obviously they can't necessarily do that because that character doesn't exist, because like, you know, the Fantastic Four doesn't exist in the continuity, but obviously the Fox and Disney deal, so it's like, you think eventually it might lead to that, but that'll probably be something that pops up later on. But because the Skrull exists, there's always a possibility. But it seems like they're kind of innocent people, but I guess there's always going to be, I guess Super Skrull ends up being like this Skrull that ends up, you know, maybe because of his circumstances, he kind of goes rogue, and, you know, wants power to fight back and save his people, but gets consumed by it and becomes like a big baddie. Potentially, I don't know. Like, once again, the MCU does its own thing with these movies, so it could completely not go down that route. You know, especially what they set the Skrulls up to be, they might not go down that route at all. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Easily one of my favorite bits is obviously Jude Law at the end being like, okay, you know, it's like, you've done well, get here, Carol, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, show me that you have the right to get past me or something like that. You know, basically not using your powers and stuff like that. She blasts him and it's like, I have nothing to prove to you. Like, but I thought that's kind of interesting too, because for her, it's like she's basically declaring war on her creed, because she's like, yo, like, you go back and you tell the Supreme Intelligence I'm coming for it. And that's, well, like I said, I'm curious to see if that's something she's handled in these 20 years, or is that still something at that? Because I doubt Avengers Endgame is going to tackle it a lot. We'll probably get a little bit to what Carol's been up to and like what exactly happened from where Captain Marvel might have left off in that, you know, point, and to where she got Fury's signal. I even love her being like, use it in emergencies. And that is kind of, well, I guess, like, because it's just so interesting to me, because it's like, after everything that's happened, Fury picked now. I guess like when it's like a mass extinction type of thing of like people turning to dust in front of you, it's like, okay, this is some like mega level stuff, because I guess he figured like this is something even the Avengers can't handle. We need to bring in the big guns for this. And it is interesting, like, because I've talked about that before, because I remember hearing people talk about the fact that Carol was being, you know, Captain Marvel was being set up as the strongest character in the MCU so far. I'm like, I don't doubt that the way she's like ripping through ships, no one else is kind of like, you know, she kind of puts every other Avenger to kind of shame. Maybe her and Thor, I feel like she might have an upper hand on even Thor with just what she's capable of doing, but they might be on par certain levels, which that kind of speaks volumes, because that means like she's on some god level stuff. I mean, you know, because I like I talked about that before, I didn't know where she ranked and everything. Like, I don't know if she's outright like celestial powers, because I don't even know what Thor ranks against like a celestial like ego. I also love that bit where Fury was basically like, everyone calls me Fury, and then Carol's being like, what about your mom? Fury. And so that was just such an interesting little thing. I mean, obviously that plays a role later on, because like when his boss is there and calls him like Nicholas or Nick, and he's like, wait, what? Which I had to go back, because I just obviously went back and watched the movies, but I don't think anyone ever has called him Nick before. So that might be like one of those little continuity things you never really paid attention to, till you're like, oh yeah, everyone calls him Fury, no one calls him Nick. So that could be an interesting thing. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, like that 20 years she was gone, like I said, she might have been like, you know, in like some state or something, because we know Roman took an interest in her, because obviously, like, you know, when you think about it and everything like that, he didn't have her powers in Guardians, so that must mean something must have happened, like he never caught up with her or something. Like I said, this also stems back to what I brought up earlier. Maybe it's just because of her powers she actually ages slowly. So I mean, who's to say? Like I was bringing up earlier, I'm very interested to see what they would do for, like, you know, a sequel of Captain Marvel. Would it take place in those 20 years, or will we kind of have like a Captain America thing where like her whole thing is, you know, on Earth? I'm also, because obviously like this is like she had just gotten back home and she had to leave again, so I'm curious, like, is, because I mean we don't really have that many like space heroes. Like I guess you could make the argument that as Guardians with Thor, like, you know, but that's kind of a different thing, because Asgard's like a different dimension. Well, it was. But like other than that, really the only like space people we have are the Guardians, so it'd be kind of nice to kind of flush out the roster more, to have more space people. Like I'd love to see like, you know, Carol and the Guardians kind of on space, like, you know, they would cross paths at some point in time, you would think, you know, like, I mean in the future, not necessarily just now, but you know, that also depends on how everything with Guardians ends up playing out going forward. Like obviously like the movie's going to be made, but it's not coming out till like what, well, there's no specific date. Yeah, I think they were saying maybe 2021 or something like that. I don't remember. Or maybe even 2022. Either way. So there's that whole situation. But I'm curious to see ultimately what they end up doing with Captain Marvel going forward. Like I said, or we're just going to see her kicking it on Earth for a while. Probably not, just because it's like having literally one of the most powerful beings on Earth all the time. You kind of have to let them be off doing something else, because there's always going to be that question, hey, like this situation is going down. Why isn't Captain Marvel here? Kind of going back to the earlier point of like why Fury picked now, literally after everything, the Chitauri invasion, Ultron, like you picked now. I guess he wasn't aware of Thanos' whole thing going down, but you would think Fury having the connections he did. But to be fair, I'm sure all that happened pretty quickly, so it's kind of like, yeah, had no real time to really kind of jump on that. But people disappearing, it's like, now's the time to call Carol. As I was discussing earlier too, like, I'm surprised it didn't have a bigger connection to, like, I figured it wouldn't in the grand scheme of things anyway, because Captain Marvel is still kind of its own thing. They're kind of setting her up. Like, obviously she's gonna play her role in Endgame, but it's not like this, like, it's not like everything in this had to do with Endgame. It's like, no, we're setting up this character that's going to come back later on in this shape and form. Which that in itself is kind of interesting, that they literally, like, obviously, like, the thing at the end is like, oh yeah, here's Carol popping up in Endgame. It's so interesting because they don't do that often, where it's like you have one movie and then you hard cut to like another literal scene from another movie. Like, I think it was the end of Age of Ultron that had a scene from Civil War. It's the scene where Sam and Steve are talking to Bucky, of that type of situation happening. Like, I think there's another one I'm thinking of, but I can't quite place it. Because obviously there's setup stuff, but like to literally like take the scene from the movie like that, like it doesn't happen that often. So I think it's just kind of interesting. I wonder, is that why the device did stop going off, because that meant Carol was in close proximity? She had finally gotten there. She's like, so that's why it stopped beeping after all this time. I wonder how long did it take Carol to get there? I mean, she's probably like halfway across the galaxy, so probably took a long ass time to get there. I mean, or that might have been like I said, it comes down to whatever her situation is. That might have been what woke her up from her situation, is hearing that beep and knowing like, yo, stuff is in trouble. Which, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, that might be the sad situation we find out, that, like, you know, maybe Maria's still around, but Monica got snapped, or vice versa. It's like, yeah, my mom, she got snapped, because Carol might be checking in on the people she cared about. I mean, you know, because that's furthering of like, we don't know fully who on Earth that we kind of gotten to know over the course of this MCU got snapped. It does ultimately beg the question, like, who is going to be the one that ends up taking down Thanos? Obviously, everything with the quantum realm, with Ant-Man, and then you got Carol doing her thing. Like, it's going to be like a team effort, but I'm curious, like I said, I'm so interested to find out like what the showdown is going to be, because like Thanos is kind of alone, so who's on his side with all of this? Like, what's going to happen with the Infinity Stones? Could Carol destroy the Infinity Stones, like, as powerful as she is? I feel like no one else really can, because you shouldn't be able to do that, you know? So, which, that's also another thing too, like, how the hell did the Tesseract get out of Goose? Like, he must have just spit it out one night. Big question too, where the hell is Goose, by the way? Like I said, not unless that's some stuff that happened at the very end that I just didn't see, like I brought up earlier. Side note, I guess because like the aura that pops around her, she has superhuman strength. Well, to be fair, like, I guess even at the beginning you kind of know that she kind of has superhuman strength, because she's almost on like some super soldier level, like superhuman strength, just the way she was kind of knocking the Skrulls back earlier, even when her hands were bound. I guess when she generates the energy, it gives her more superhuman strength, because at the end with like Roman is sending off all those like missiles to basically blow up the planet, she stops one herself, and it's like, geez, it wasn't even looking like she was like, well, she seemed like she was propelling herself at one point in time, but it seemed like she just stopped and was just holding it at one point in time and just like knocked it back. It's not like she blasted it, she just like pushed it back and made it explode with the others. It's like, geez. Once again, just, it's crazy how powerful she is, dude. I'm curious to see how she ends up, what role she ends up playing in Endgame. Also wanted to talk about the fact is, I really like the little tribute they did for Stan Lee at the beginning of, like, you know, kind of like the Marvel Studios logo thing. It's like, instead of all the like MCU stuff, it's like all these different cameos and behind the scenes stuff with Stan that they showed. And I thought that was kind of a really nice, touching way to kind of open the movie with that. I also love this cameo too, just being the little thing that it was. It's just like, she's looking for the Skrull on the train, and she lowers the newspaper and sees him, and he's smiling at her, and then like Carol smiles back. It was like a little heartwarming thing. I thought like that was nice. I thought that was pretty neat. But really, I think that's all I really want to talk about in this video. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.